What this family found outside their rented beach house can only be described as a natural wonder. They found well over 1,000 small black rocks scattered across a large patch of beach. At least that's what they thought they were. They all looked the same, dark and round, but then they heard something moving inside. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Ryan was always a light sleeper, but something very unusual pulled him from his dreams during their second night on vacation. He, his wife Sophie, and their daughter June had rented a beachfront cabin together. It stood right on a semi-private section of the beach, a supposed calm place to relax and enjoy together, but this vacation would prove to be far from relaxing. It would test their resolve and understanding of everything they'd thought possible, and it all had to do with that sound that just woke Brian up. The noise seemed to come from the beachfront, maybe near the waterline. Brian barely stirred at first, but that soon changed. The faint sounds could easily be explained. Maybe crabs scuttling on the sand, or a piece of driftwood rolling with the tide. Nothing serious, and certainly not worth getting out of bed for, they thought at first. Their alarm was set for 6:30 a.m. for a morning swim, a routine they had planned together, but this night something intervened. Suddenly, the quiet night broke even louder. From somewhere beyond the open window, Sophie heard seagulls squawking loudly, their cries shrill and frantic. Ryan sat up straight, wide awake now. This wasn't just normal beach noise, the seagulls sounded aggressive, like they were attacking something. It was enough to get everyone's attention, especially their daughter June. Brian got out of bed, pulled on his shorts, and walked across their creaky wooden floor. He grabbed the flashlight from their luggage just in case. The noise had woken everyone up. Being so close to the water, they all knew wildlife could be a nuisance, but this felt different somehow. Sophie and June followed Brian curiously. Seagulls had stolen their food the day before, but that was nothing unusual. However, this time the birds sounded desperate, screeching and diving at something hidden from view. It was always a challenge to keep things safe on the open sand, where nature ruled. So, when the family stepped out, their minds somehow expected trouble. Something strange was definitely happening out there. The whole family could sense it. It was the odd noise, the animals acting wild, the uneasy feeling. That alone made them step out into the cool night air, flashlights in hand. Something, or someone, was out there, but nothing could have prepared them for what they would soon find. Whatever was happening on the beach that night would change their entire vacation, but they had no idea yet. The beach had been quietly transformed, almost as if by magic, without anyone noticing. And when the family discovered the truth, they would remember this moment for a long time. For now, they stepped outside, unaware. Brian walked across the cold sand, scanning the shadows thrown by the moon and the house lot. The air was fresh. The only sounds now were the waves and distant seagulls. He checked the surrounding beach, searching for anything unusual, but after several slow minutes of looking, he saw nothing. But there was something there, waiting to be found. Their daughter, June, was also trying to help. She stood just beyond their porch, staring down at a strange black section of beach, a bit further toward the waterline. It looked a bit off, but even she figured it was just the reflection of the moon, or something similar, that caused this effect. However, in reality, this dark area was something far more bizarre. They were thousands of mysterious black objects scattered across the sand. And the next day, when the first sunlight reached over the horizon, it would be daughter June who spotted them first. This family was standing at the edge of something completely unexpected, with no clue yet how their lives were about to change forever. Clueless, the family walked back into the house, hoping to get a few more hours of sleep. It was a rest they very much needed for what was about to come their way. Back inside, the family's nerves slowly began to calm. They tried to settle back in bed, but curiosity was strong, especially for June. She kept peeking through the curtains, wondering what the dark shapes could be. The steady roll of the waves finally helped them drift off again. Tomorrow, they would find answers. Early morning sunlight woke the family sooner than planned. June's voice was the first to break the silence. "Mom, Dad, come, look!" Sophie and Brian rushed outside, rubbing sleep from their eyes. On the sand, they found hundreds of seagulls pecking furiously around a huge cluster of black shapes, all pressed close together. The air was cool, and the beach was scattered with seaweed and shells. Sophie stepped carefully across the sand, her eyes fixed on the dark mouth. The seagulls shrieked and flapped, desperate to reach whatever was underneath. Brian grabbed a stick, waving it at the birds to drive them away so they could get closer. That's when they saw it clearly. There were thousands of small, round black objects, each about the size of a golf ball. They were piled up across a huge patch of sand, almost as far as they could see. Brian bent down, picking one up. It was heavier than he expected, almost warm. June's curiosity got the better of her, and she knelt down, running her hands through the pile. "What are they?" she asked, eyes wide. The seagulls kept coming back, screeching and diving at the edges. Sophie kept shooing them away, heart pounding. They needed to protect whatever these were, even if they didn't understand yet. Once the gulls scattered, Sophie crouched next to Brian, turning the black object over in her hands. It was smooth and almost shiny, with tiny white specks stuck to its surface. She gently tapped it, half expecting it to crack like a rock, but nothing happened. The family looked at each other, still puzzled. Then, suddenly, June gasped. She thought she heard a faint sound, a tiny scratch or movement from inside one of the black objects. Sophie and Brian listened closely. There it was again, a soft shuffle, almost like something alive inside. The three of them froze, the realization dawning slowly. These weren't just rocks, something was inside. The seagulls seemed to know it too. They shrieked even louder, circling low over the pile. The family quickly understood that these black shapes were probably eggs, hundreds, maybe thousands of them, all of them out in plain sight. Instinctively, the family felt the urge to keep the birds away and protect what they had found. Sophie tried to remember stories about animals nesting on beaches. She'd heard about turtles laying eggs at night, but she'd never seen anything like this before. Brian scratched his head, searching his memory for any explanation, but nothing fit. The number of eggs, their black color, it all seemed impossible. Their questions kept growing. As the sun rose, the danger became clear. Seagulls were relentless, and there were too many eggs to guard on their own. Sophie knew they couldn't just leave them there. They needed to come up with a plan, fast, if they wanted to keep the eggs safe until they could figure out what to do. Brian pulled out his phone and glanced at the vacation home next door. He remembered meeting a friendly woman there on their first day. Her name was Linda, and she seemed to know a lot about local wildlife. She and her family spent the day together, and at the end, they exchanged numbers. Brian never figured he'd be calling the next-door neighbor to help with a mysterious egg situation, but there was nothing normal about whatever they were facing, so he didn't care. They needed all the help they could get. Without hesitating, he called her, hoping she might understand what was happening on the beach. After a few rings, Linda answered with a tired voice. Brian quickly explained what they had found. Thousands of black eggs on the sand, seagulls attacking, and strange noises coming from inside the egg. Linda listened, growing more alert. "Stay there, I'll be right over," she said, voice steady. Relief filled Brian's chest. As they waited, the family took turns watching the eggs and chasing away birds. June stood guard with a beach towel, flapping it at any gulls that came too close. Sophie knelt beside the mound, careful not to touch too many eggs. When Linda arrived, she was already wide awake, carrying a small notebook. Linda knelt by the eggs and examined them closely, her face thoughtful. "I think you're right. They're eggs, not rocks. But I've never seen black ones like this before." The family listened eagerly as Linda explained her theory. "They could be a rare species of sea turtle, but we need to move them soon." Linda picked up an egg, turning it gently in her hands. The shell was smooth, with a dull shine. She listened, pressing her ear against it, and nodded. "There's definitely something alive inside. We have to protect them." The family realized there was no time to waste. Seagulls were already circling again, more aggressive now. Brian looked at the pile, noticing a few eggs wobbling ever so slightly. The sight made his breath catch. "They're really alive," June whispered, eyes wide with wonder. Sophie squeezed her daughter's shoulder, feeling a strange mix of worry and excitement. The eggs seemed even more precious now, like a secret the beach had hidden. The seagulls swooped lower, screeching with hunger. Their wings battered the air as they landed at the edge of the mound, pecking and grabbing at any exposed egg. Linda waved her arms and shouted, sending them scattering for a moment. "We can't wait," she said. "We have to get these eggs off the sand." Brian remembered the large storage shed behind their rental house. It was empty except for a few tools and some beach chairs. It could be perfect for keeping the eggs safe from predators. "Let's use the shed," he said, his voice urgent. Linda agreed. So together, they started to plan how to move the eggs safely inside. They rushed back to the house, gathering anything they could use: beach towels, empty coolers, even a laundry basket. Working together, they began lifting clusters of eggs, careful not to jostle them too much. June carried the smaller ones, Sophie lined them up gently, and Linda checked each batch. It became an urgent but careful routine. Each trip to the shed felt heavier than the last, even though the eggs themselves were light. Brian counted aloud, trying to keep track. By the time the final batch was brought in, their tally was just over 1,000 eggs, all now resting in the safety of the cool, shaded shed behind their rental. "All we can do now is wait," Linda said, her tone a mix of relief and disbelief. She looked around at the neat rows of black eggs, stacked carefully on soft towels. Nobody could believe what they'd accomplished. The shed was warm and quiet. The family felt both proud and nervous about what might happen. The family tried to settle back into vacation life, but their thoughts were never far from the shed. Meals were quiet, with everyone stealing glances toward the backyard. Linda checked in often, bringing fresh water and updates from her phone about turtle nesting. "We have to keep them warm and undisturbed," she reminded everyone. Sophie started a careful routine. Every few hours, she would go to the shed with her notepad, checking the temperature and peeking at the eggs. Brian would check the door, making sure nothing could get in. June liked to sit quietly and listen for any signs of movement, sometimes catching faint tapping sounds inside the shells. At first, nothing changed. The eggs sat still and silent, smooth and black in the shadows. Then, during one quiet afternoon, June noticed something different. There was a gentle shiver, almost invisible, from a small group near the middle. She called for her parents', excitement bubbling in her voice. They all leaned in, barely daring to breathe. By the third day, the shed was no longer silent. At least a dozen eggs began to wiggle and shift, their shells making soft, rhythmic click. The family watched in amazement, feeling both anxious and hopeful. Life was stirring just beneath the surface. Stronger in the shed, Linda guided June in recording the activity, both fascinated by the unseen life inside the black eggs. On the fourth night, loud gull cries woke Brian, who rushed outside sensing something urgent. The family gathered with flashlights, and as Brian unlocked the shed, the first cracks appeared on the glossy shells. One egg split open, revealing a tiny turtle. Soon, dozens more cracked, the shed filling with movement and soft knocks as hatchlings crawled onto top. Linda filmed everything, urging the family to protect the newborns until sunrise so they could reach the ocean safely. As more eggs burst, the shed became alive with flippers and tiny bodies. The family watched silently, awestruck by the sacredness of the moment. Hundreds of turtles emerged, instinctively moving toward the door. Linda noted their unusually dark shells and identified them as rare black sea turtles. The family realized that many adult turtles must have come ashore at once to lay the enormous number of eggs. An extraordinary event they had, unknowingly sheltered and safe. Hundreds of baby turtles soon filled the shed, pushing instinctively toward the door. As Sophie, Brian, and Linda cleared a safe path for them, the ground outside began to tremble. A deep rumble rolled in from the ocean, and the hatchlings froze before turning toward the sound. Moments later, enormous shapes emerged at the shoreline, more than 100 adult black sea turtles returning under the moonlight, drawn by the cries of their young. The adults gathered outside the shed, surrounding the entrance in a silent, powerful formation. Their low calls were met by the hatchlings' rapid squeaks, creating a strange, beautiful chorus. Without fear, the grown turtles moved past the humans and waited patiently as the babies surged forward to join them. Guided by the adults, the newborn turtles formed a vast, shifting cluster and began their journey toward the sea. The family stepped back, watching the extraordinary reunion unfold. Together, the adults and hatchlings crossed the sand until the last tiny turtle vanished into the surf. When it was over, the shed felt impossibly quiet. The family and Linda stood in awe, knowing they had witnessed something rare, a once-in-a-lifetime migration that left them chained. In the days that followed, June kept looking toward the beach, carrying the memory of that night like a small miracle. As the vacation came to an end, the family couldn't forget the night hundreds of baby turtles hatched in their shed. Back home, they shared the story with friends, kept Linda's photos as proof, and created a scrapbook to remember the miracle. June became fascinated with sea turtles and stayed in touch with Linda, eager to learn more. Though the shed and beach soon looked ordinary again, the memory stayed vivid. Brian often imagined the hatchlings swimming far out in the ocean, and Sophie felt grateful for the experience that had brought them closer as a family. They left the beach knowing they had witnessed something rare and beautiful, an unforgettable night when life returned to the sea. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscription, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming story.